Welcome to the LPL Brief again. Of course, everyone who watched LPL today is really excited about LGD Gaming 2-0ing QG Reapers, the only team at the top of Group A that has only lost one series, and they haven't lost to a team in Group A yet. So this is a really exciting thing that's happening that people are talking about. Is it are QG better or LGD worse? And I'll talk about that a little bit at the end, but I think that this sort of topic needs to be unpacked better, and I don't feel completely comfortable doing it right now. I'd like to watch another series from LGD and then talk about them, so I'm going to wait on that. But for now, I am going to talk about the group format itself, because we just talked about how QG have been super dominant at the top of Group A for a while, and they've only lost one series to Royal Never Give Up in Group B during the intergroup. Now that we've seen Group A versus Group B, and we've seen Group A versus all of Group A, and Group B versus all of Group B, and we're just now starting to see the third leg of competition within groups, right? I think it's a good time to talk about how well these groups have distributed teams by skill. There's something of a debate going on, and actually the consensus overwhelmingly is that Group B is stronger than Group A. I have kind of publicly disagreed with this, and it isn't because I think that, people are completely underrating certain teams in Group A or anything weird like this. It's more to do with the idea that Group B, sure, they have a lot of teams that can kind of take games off each other, but they really lack consistency. And this is the main point that I want to drive home about the relative strengths of Group A and Group B, is I feel that there's a little more consistency coming out of Group A, regardless of how their teams are distributed in terms of skill. Whereas Group B, kind of, you can't necessarily predict how all the teams in Group B are going to do, where their strengths and their weaknesses are, and this has led them to lose really weird series to teams like Masters 3, but also beat out teams like or EDG or Royal Never Give Up, things like this. So I think that this is something to talk about more in depth. The idea of this group breakdown and whether or not I think it's been good so far. So first of all, a spoiler, yes, I think that the group system has been something that I've surprisingly enjoyed pretty well. Second, let's talk about the relative strengths of teams in Group A and Group B. Now, since this debate was kind of more active when LGD wasn't doing well at all, we're going to sort of put a pin in LGD Gaming for a second and talk a lot more about them as they were really terrible. So the first thing here when we just look at the groups flat out is that you see that QG were very close to the top. They only lost one series to a Group B team. And then after that you have a very big drop off from Snake to the bottom. LGD and Masters 3 used to be tied with only 3 wins apiece, right? At the start of this leg of the within group round, LGD were tied with Master 3. So it seemed like there was a very big gap between the top 3 and the bottom 3 teams. And this was a big dividing point for these two squads. And so this is why I think Group A was largely perceived to be pretty weak. Whereas Group B, you could see going into this week, there was a 3-way tie for third place. Okay, so the idea was that there are more strong teams or mid-tier teams overall in Group B. The problem with this is that at the time when this debate was really in vogue, is I felt that there were only really 2 good teams in the LPL, okay? QG Reapers and Royal Never Give Up, and they both lost 1 or 2 series in particular, and after that there was a bit of a drop-off where the team below them had lost at least 4. IG or EDG or something like this. WE, Snake. So to me it seemed like it didn't really matter the relative strengths of the groups because both of these teams were the teams leading the league. Both of these teams were the strong teams. It was really irrelevant. QG wasn't getting boosted by a weaker group because QG have, after the second round, done very well against Group B teams, by and large. Royal weren't being boosted by their group because they did about the same against Group A and Group B teams. They lost 1 series to both of them, and they had some trouble unexpectedly against teams like Masters 3, just like Invictus Gaming did. So I think that here you're seeing a point of where the difference is. And at bottom, the difference between Group A and Group B teams was 4 wins, okay? There was 16 Group A wins and 20 Group B team wins in the between group round. Effectively, what this comes down to is that 44% of the games were won by Group A teams, and that is a significant difference, but it only amounts to maybe one team in total. So when you're looking at the standings and you're seeing maybe 2 Group B teams that are really solid mid-tier teams over Group A having just 3 bottom-tier teams, what you're really seeing is that at any given moment, Group B has like one extra team that you can kind of predict. So this is how I see it. Invictus Gaming, they had a really inconsistent bottom lane, or a bottom lane that could be really targeted. And they got most of their advantages off of freezing their lanes in their solo lanes and getting minions this way. And this is why teams could easily dismantle them if they just targeted their bottom lane. They also had pretty good drafting, right? Edward Gaming, some games Clearlove did 2013, 2014 Clearlove things and just didn't do anything, right? Or dove turrets and had very, very little impact on the game overall. Vici Gaming, Dandy has been great. He's been playing out of his mind, but this team could kind of be picked apart depending on whether or not EasyHoon has a solid mid-game champion. And if there's something this easy to pinpoint and this easy to target that takes this team from a mid-tier team to kind of a bottom-tier team, it's really hard to rate them. OMG, I feel, had a similar issue, except instead of targeting just one thing, I felt like OMG, I mean, they're just very mediocre to me. It's hard to say this. They have a few strategies that they've been able to execute, and I think that kind of like Vici, they're good when their mid laner can roam a lot. But overall, OMG, they either play off of SMLZ, who is actually pretty easy to target and doesn't position completely ideally. It's so hard to articulate because I don't really quite understand why OMG are considered good. In any case, all these teams here are kind of shuffling around. They're occasionally able to get a couple, get a point off of Snake. They're maybe able to lose a point off of a team like Masters 3. And then they just sit at the bottom, and they buy over, not really understanding which team is the least mediocre, or you can't really predict where they're going to end up. So to me, that doesn't make the Group B overall stronger. It makes it slightly more confused. I feel overall there are a lot of teams in Group A that have very defined identities. Snake is the early game macro team that they practice and refine a lot of these lane swaps. QG were very strong at the side wave push early on, but now they have focused a lot more on bottom lane ganks, getting bottom lane ahead, and a UZI style team, early picking AD carry or last picking AD carry so you can get a counter pick if you want, things like this, that I think that QG, you can really define how they're going to play the game, and you can expect them to play the game in this way. WE, very slow building team. They rely on Mystic to play as real and kind of come back. They rely on a lot of Baron steals and plays from Condi in the late game in teamfights. This is a team you can kind of expect to do what they want. Even Energy Pacemaker all. They have really, really great early coordination. They're able to get leads all the time. They're actually top 3 in the league for early game rating, right? Because they get ridiculous leads at 10 and 20 minutes, but then they just throw. I don't understand it. But these are all things you can expect from these teams, whereas I feel like you watch a Group B match with some of these teams and you don't necessarily get what you expect to get, right? IG doesn't win for some reason. VG doesn't win for some reason. To an extent, I will accept the point that Snake has been not winning some of these matches that you expect, but I think that you can pinpoint a very expected reason as to why, okay? They're used to getting the 2v1 in the top, or the 3v0, I should say, for free. But now enemy teams have started counter-swapping against them and sort of contesting them for Rift Herald. So this has changed the way that Snake have to approach the early game. They're no longer able to get their leads, and again, they're very predictable in this way, because they either get ridiculous leads from lane swaps or they don't, and then their team fighting isn't very good. So you can almost always theorize how Snake will do, okay? You can't really do that with IG. You can't really do that with OMG. It's really hard to do that with VG. So, I don't know, I guess I've made this point as many times as I can. In general, I don't think Group B is significantly stronger than Group A, and as things change, as LGD maybe builds a little bit, I'm not going to say anything on that yet, or EDG builds a little bit, QG start to fall, all of these players are starting to make moves, and this could completely change again. That's why the group system, I think, is really interesting, because you start out playing against teams in your group, okay, on either side, and then you go and you play the intergroup, and you kind of combine what you've learned from both parts of the system, and you go back and you play teams within your group one more time. So this allows the decider to be for you to play against teams that are directly in competition with you for playoff seeding. So you're not playing IG to try to get your playoff seeding if you're LGD, right? This makes sense. So I really liked that format in the end. One thing that people probably don't like about it is if, for example, we were seeing really, really high profile teams, EDG and LGD, they're supposed to be really good, right? It would be really disappointing for fans if you only got to see them play once. Right now we have QG and RNG, we only got to see them play once, and it was a really disappointing series actually, so we probably won't get to see them play again until playoffs. There's also an opportunity I think that I'm still waiting for these group systems to have an impact on scrims, where during the first leg you can scrim teams in the opposite group, alright, because you don't play them for a while. Second leg, you can scrim teams within your own group because you don't play them for a while. Third leg, you can scrim teams in the opposite group again. So I think all of these ideas are things that can develop with time, because right now the scrim culture is still not completely good, and Snake manager Zoe has actually told me directly, this has to change for teams to become more competitive again. So I'm hoping that this format can have an impact there. Something that I don't really like is the shift to BO3. I think it's good for cases like VG, OMG, etc., where maybe these teams should be close together because they've won and lost a similar amount of single games. But for teams like RNG, they should be further ahead of the second rung of teams. They're consistently winning series, right? But they're only ahead of IG by a couple points, or they're only ahead of EDG by a couple points when they've won significant, like 7 more games than they are. So to me, this is a little strange overall, that teams that are consistently winning aren't able to very easily separate themselves from the rest. So this is something I miss from BO2. You can see both sides of this point system, right? Because these teams should be closer together. But I think also in BO2, if you're really close, you're probably going to split a lot of series. So you're still not going to be separated too much. It's just the teams that are consistently able to get those 2-0s, the teams that are consistently able to dominate their competition. There's also less incentive to really focus on every match, I think, with more of these games. So I really miss that aspect of BO2, and I wish that they would re-implement it in LPL regular season again. Unfortunately, this is what we have for now. We'll see. I think it's fun for fans, and LPL is really, really big about the marketing and making things enjoyable for the fans, so I think that's something that they will probably retain for now. I'll talk more about the playoffs group as we get further on in the years and how I think this playoff format is really interesting. But for now, I think we'll just talk about the groups and my kind of reaction to them as we're closing down. Today's matches. LGD versus QG was really interesting because I think LGD showed a lot of some of the stuff that they used to be really good at, okay? They did the swap much better. First game, they got 1 tower for free, right? And then they were able to pressure this advantage that they had on Marin. Second game, QG didn't want to be in a lane swap situation against LGD, so they counter swapped. But this put V an entire creep wave behind Marin. So I don't really know why they were expecting this to work out better for them. Either way, they got completely destroyed by LGD in this lane swap scenario. Early game. Now, there were parts where QG caught up. That was great. There was a little fight around blue buff where they were really close. PYL made a really big misplay and had to use ult and had to use flash, and then they just collapsed, and it ended up only being a 2-for-2 because I think Imp kited that very well, and Wayless juggled the aggro really well. So overall, I think it was not too bad for them, but it still showed that these teams were even and LGD hadn't pulled ahead too much. The other aspect that showed a lot of improvement was their flanking wards. They had placed wards much better. LGD had very, very good vision. This was something that they didn't even have when they were good last year, so I was excited to see the vision placed better. I think this is a result of having a more team-focused jungler. Amy was just everywhere where he needed to be, it seemed. I think that LGD showed a really, really good understanding of which lanes to prioritize. This was the big key for me, because as QG were focusing bottom lane in the second game, especially, Swift was bottom the entire series. He even invaded on weak side, right? Because LGD had their duo bot, and then QG had their duo top, so Swift even invaded on weak side. And just to be close to the bottom lane, because he knew the bottom lane would switch back. So this was really weird to me. And then he ganked bottom lane a lot. Amy responded by saying, okay, whatever, I'll gank bot, I'll gank top, I'll gank mid, I'll gank top, I'll gank mid. I think this has been a problem for QG, is this new bot lane focus, because Swift used to gank mid a lot earlier. And if you looked at Doinby's CS leads at 10, it was slightly negative, and now it's very negative. I think the way Doinby lanes, which is that he'll often prioritize a trade over CS, has really punished him more. Getting Doinby ahead was a big thing for QG to an extent, because he was able to be a good control point for them. So I think focusing bottom is freeing a lot more people up to punish Doinby as a weakness of QG at this moment. Swift has just become really predictable, and I think this is the pattern we see with a lot of UCI's teams, so I hope that they find a good way around this, because I understand right now UCI is the lane that can do a lot with a lead, and this is something QG haven't really had before. They haven't had a lane that just pressures the heck out of a lead. So this is something they really want to exploit, right, and power to them, but I think it makes their jungle pathing really predictable and easy to play against. The final thing LGD did really well was sidewave pushing. They used Easy Route, they used Banner of Command. They were constantly ahead of QG in sidewave pushing, which is something QG were good at earlier this split, so that is something LGD have always done. They've just always known how to rotate between the lanes, especially with Sivir, and push out waves really, really effectively. So I was glad to see that part of their playstyle kind of back in action today. Again, I'm not going to necessarily say anything about LGD or QG until I see another series probably from both of them, but it was promising to see them play a lot more like themselves than they have all season. Finally, the EPA versus WE series. I think EPA reacted to having the Baron stolen in the first game by doing something no teams do, which is just ignoring Baron for the next two games. Unfortunately, they still show a lot of really weird mid to late game decision making, like the overcommit on the final tower push by Crisis was just bad. I mean, it was very obvious who's going to get collapsed on and killed there. WE are showing more weaknesses in the early game. I think that if they don't get a lane swap scenario, which is there's something that they're pretty good at, they tend to fall behind earlier. They also just Condi forcing things. I think he got super into the Devourer build Kindred and trying to make it work, and he just forced everything in game 2, so I felt like WE just lost that on their own. EPA usually don't win games, even when they get ridiculous leads. They actually average top 3 in 10-20 minute gold leads, which I think I've already said they just throw with their terrible mid and late game decision making. But WE, this is something that's going to separate them from the top teams and mid-tier teams, is their inability to kind of react to some of these early game playmaking in standard lane scenarios. And this is a big reason why I don't rate Condi as high as a lot of people. I think he's really cool and really fun to watch, but his vision control isn't that great. It's similar to MLXG, right? And he doesn't have someone who necessarily compensates for it with him. And Zero is a very, very strong laning support, but he doesn't roam a lot. So if you're going to focus a lot on your jungler, you want a support to kind of roam with him, or a mid. I think Qiao Qiao and Zero are both too focused on laning to really aid this kind of style that WE are developing. This has been the LPL Brief. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you guys tomorrow. It isn't because I think that, people are completely underrating certain teams in Group A or anything weird like this. It's more to do with the idea that Group B, sure, they have a lot of teams that can kind of take games off each other, but they really, really lack consistency. And this is the main point that I want to drive home about the relative strengths of Group A and Group B, is I feel that there's a little more consistency coming out of Group A regardless of how their teams are distributed. Welcome to the LPL Brief. Again, of course, everyone who watched LPL today is really excited about LGD Gaming 2-0ing QG Reapers, the only team at the top of Group A that has only lost one series, and they haven't lost to a team in Group A yet. So this is a really, really exciting thing that's happening that people are talking about. Is it QG better or LGD worse? And I'll talk about that a little bit at the end, but I think that this sort of B, and we've seen Group A versus all of Group A and Group B versus all of Group B, and we're just now starting to see the third leg of competition within groups, right? I think it's a good time to talk about how well these groups have distributed teams by skill. There's something of a debate going on, and actually the consensus overwhelmingly is that Group B is stronger than Group A. I have kind of publicly disagreed with this, and the topic needs to be unpacked better, and I don't feel completely comfortable doing it right now. I'd like to watch another series from LGD and then talk about them, so I'm going to wait on that. But for now, I am going to talk about the group format itself, because we just talked about how QG have been super dominant at the top of Group A for a while, and they've only lost one series to Royal Never Give Up in Group B during the intergroup. Now that we've seen Group A versus Group B in terms of skill, whereas Group B, kind of you can't necessarily predict how all the teams in Group B are going to do, where their strengths and their weaknesses are, and this has led them to lose really weird series to teams like Masters 3, but also beat out teams like or EDG or Royal Never Give Up, things like this. So I think that this is something to talk about more in depth. The idea of this group breakdown